You've sprayed. You've put down those little bait stations from the hardware store. Maybe you bought the heavy-duty stuff, the fogger that fills the whole room with chemicals. You cleaned everything. You threw away food. You thought it was working. And then a week later, you turned on the kitchen light at midnight, and there they were again. That cycle, spray, brief relief, they come back, is the experience of millions of people dealing with German cockroaches specifically. And if that's been your experience, there's a specific, documented reason it keeps happening that most of the products you've been using are never going to solve. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because the biology of German cockroaches, combined with the way resistance to common insecticides has developed over the past several decades, means that the spray cans on the hardware store shelf are frequently the wrong tool for this particular pest. What actually works is a three-part approach that professional pest services use in severe infestations. Two of the steps are fairly well known. The third, the one that separates a result that holds from one that rebounds, is the step almost nobody talks about. We're going to cover all three, explain exactly why each one works, and walk through the common mistakes that cause people to keep retreating the same problem indefinitely. Most pest problems can be addressed with a single well-placed treatment. German cockroaches are not that kind of problem, and understanding why changes how you approach the whole situation. A single female German cockroach produces an egg capsule, called an Ootheca, roughly every 20 to 30 days. Each capsule contains between 30 and 48 eggs. She carries it attached to her body until 1 to 2 days before hatching, then drops it in a protected location. Over her lifetime, she'll produce 4 to 8 of these capsules, which means a single female is capable of contributing 200 or more offspring. Those offspring reach reproductive maturity in about 40 to 60 days. Under warm, humid conditions with available food and water, conditions that describe most kitchen environments, one gravid female and her descendants can produce thousands of roaches within a few months. This is why a treatment that kills most of the visible population doesn't solve the problem. If a small number of females survive, or if egg capsules that were present before treatment hatch afterward, the population rebuilds rapidly from those survivors. You see a reduction, think the treatment worked, and 3 to 4 weeks later, you're back to where you started, or close to it. The practical implication is this: if you've been spraying a pyrethroid-based product repeatedly and the infestation keeps returning, you may not be dealing with a reinfestation from outside the structure. You may be dealing with a resistant population that your treatment cannot eliminate. Each partial treatment cycle is actually creating selection pressure that makes the survivors and their offspring progressively harder to kill. Step 1. Physical removal with a shop vacuum. The first step is the most immediate and the most underestimated, and it requires no chemicals at all. Take a shop vacuum, a wet-dry vac with strong suction, and vacuum every harborage site you can access. Behind the refrigerator, including the compressor area, inside every cabinet and drawer. Under and behind the stove, under the dishwasher, under the sink, around the pipes, along baseboards, and in corners, any gap or void accessible from the kitchen. You are removing live roaches, egg caps, shed skins, feces, and food debris simultaneously. In heavy infestations, a thorough vacuuming session can remove the majority of the accessible population and a significant portion of the eggs present in those harborage sites. Research from multifamily housing studies found that vacuuming alone achieved population reductions of 70 to 80%, comparable in the short term to chemical treatments. The egg capsule removal is particularly important. Each intact Ootheca you remove from the structure is 30 to 48 nymphs that will never hatch. In a heavy infestation, there can be dozens of these present in the harborage areas behind your appliances. No spray or bait reaches inside a sealed egg capsule. The only way to address those eggs is to physically remove them before they hatch. Vacuuming also removes the organic debris, food particles, grease residue, fecal material that roaches feed on and that attracts them to specific areas. Removing that competing food source matters for the next 2 steps because it makes your bait and your residual treatment the most attractive option available rather than one food source among many. After vacuuming, seal the vacuum contents immediately in a plastic bag and dispose of them outside. Roaches can survive inside the canister. Empty it promptly and clean the vacuum afterward. This step provides immediate, visible reduction and sets up everything that follows to work more effectively. It is consistently underused, including by pest control professionals in some cases, and consistently undervalued by homeowners who want to reach for the chemical solution first. Step 2. Alpine WSG, a non-repellent residual treatment after physical removal has reduced the population as much as physically possible. The next step is a residual insecticide applied to every harborage area throughout the affected space. The product we recommend is Alpine WSG, a water-soluble granule formulation containing 40% dinotefuran. Dinotefuran is a neonicotinoid. It works on the insect nervous system through nicotinic acetylcholine receptors, causing paralysis and death through both contact and ingestion. The critical property that makes it appropriate for this application, and the specific reason it outperforms consumer pyrethroid sprays, is that it's non-repellent. Roaches cannot detect it. They don't avoid treated surfaces. They continue traveling their normal routes, picking up the insecticide on their bodies and returning to the harborage where they groom themselves and transfer the compound to other individuals in the colony. This transfer effect means that roaches deep in wall voids and crevices that never directly contact the spray can still be affected through contact with colony members that did. Mixing is straightforward. Dissolve approximately 20 grams of granules per gallon of water in a pump sprayer. Agitate until fully dissolved and apply as a crack and crevice and spot treatment to all harborage areas. Inside cabinet edges and seams, behind and under appliances, around pipe penetrations under the sink, along baseboards, inside motor housings, and around any other gaps adjacent to the kitchen. The solution dries clear, odorless, and non-staining on most surfaces. One important application principle: treat the whole infested floor of the home, not just the kitchen. German cockroaches migrate through wall voids and along plumbing runs. Treating only the most visible area while leaving adjacent rooms untreated means you're creating a treated zone that roaches move around rather than a barrier that intercepts the full population. Dinotefuran generally maintains efficacy against German cockroach populations where pyrethroid resistance is high, which is why it remains a professional standard in situations where consumer products have stopped working. That said, no single active ingredient should be relied on exclusively through repeated treatment cycles. Rotating to alternative products or supplementing with gel bait using the different mode of action is part of responsible resistance management. Step 3. Teco Pro IGR. The step that prevents rebound. This is the step that most DIY approaches and many consumer products skip entirely. And it's the specific reason the same infestations keep recurring even after apparent successful treatment. Teco Pro is an insect growth regulator, commonly abbreviated as IGR. It's mixed directly into the same sprayer as the Alpine WSG and applied simultaneously in the same treatment. Teco Pro contains two active ingredients, novalurin and pyriproxyfen. Novalurin is a chitin synthesis inhibitor. Chitin is the structural protein that forms an insect's exoskeleton. When nymphs treated with novalurin attempt to molt, the process by which they shed their current exoskeleton and grow a new, larger one, they cannot form a functional new exoskeleton. They die during the molt. Pyriproxyfen is a juvenile hormone mimic. It disrupts the development process that allows nymphs to mature into reproductive adults, and it reduces the viability of eggs produced by females that have been exposed to it. Females exposed to pyriproxyfen produce fewer viable oothecae. Together, these two mechanisms address the part of the life cycle that adulticide sprays cannot: the egg capsules already present in the environment and the nymphs that will hatch from them. Even if some eggs survive and hatch after treatment, nymphs emerging into an environment treated with Teco Pro face a developmental barrier they cannot overcome. They cannot molt properly, cannot mature into reproductive adults, and the population's ability to rebuild itself is disrupted for months. The residual of Teco Pro in harborage areas can persist for up to 6 months under typical conditions. The standard mixing rate is approximately 2 fluid ounces of Teco Pro per gallon of water added to the sprayer after the Alpine WSG has been dissolved. The combination is applied exactly as described for the Alpine alone, crack and crevice throughout all harborage areas. The reason IGRs are described as the overlooked piece is that they don't produce an immediate visible kill. There are no roaches dying on contact. The effect is slower and structural. It works on the population's reproductive pipeline rather than on the individuals currently visible. This makes it easy to undervalue or skip when someone is frustrated and wants immediate results. But it's precisely the absence of this step that causes infestations to rebound 4 to 6 weeks after an otherwise thorough treatment, as the eggs present at the time of treatment hatch and the new nymphs mature unchecked. What to expect after treatment and how to monitor progress. The timeline for this protocol follows a predictable pattern when it's executed properly. In the first 2 to 3 days after vacuuming and applying the spray combination, you'll typically see significant visible activity reduction. Roaches contacted by the Alpine WSG will die within hours to days. You may also see staggering or impaired movement in roaches that have picked up sublethal amounts. This is a normal indicator that the transfer effect is occurring. In weeks 1 through 3, continue seeing some nymph activity as any eggs present at treatment time complete their incubation and hatch. This is expected and does not indicate treatment failure. These newly hatched nymphs are emerging into an environment saturated with Teco Pro, and they will face developmental disruption through their molt cycles. By weeks 4 through 8, assuming thorough initial treatment and reasonable sanitation maintenance, catch rates on monitoring glue boards should be declining consistently. Glue boards placed flat against walls under appliances inside cabinets and along baseboards are your data source throughout this process. Place them at the beginning of treatment and count catches per board every few days. A consistent downward trend is the confirmation that the protocol is working. If glue board counts plateau or increase after week 3, that signals either a reinfestation source, often adjacent units in apartments, or ongoing introduction through deliveries and packaging, or harborage areas that were missed in the initial treatment. Inspect again with a flashlight and reapply to any areas showing fresh droppings or live activity. A second application of the full protocol 2 to 3 weeks after the first is standard practice for moderate to heavy infestations. This catches any areas missed initially and addresses any nymphs that have matured enough to move to new harborage since the first treatment. While the vacuum and spray combination addresses the core of the infestation, gel bait applied in small placements throughout harborage areas adds an important complementary layer, particularly for reaching roaches in areas the spray may not have fully penetrated. Products like Advion cockroach gel, which uses indoxacarb as its active ingredient, are applied in very small amounts. Pea-sized dots directly inside cabinet hinges, along the back edges of drawers, inside cracks along baseboards, and around pipe penetrations. The slow-acting mechanism of indoxacarb functions similarly to the boric acid transfer effect described in other pest contexts. Roaches that consume the bait return to harborage before dying, where they can transmit the active ingredient to other colony members through contact and food sharing. If you're using gel bait in combination with the spray, do not apply repellent sprays near the bait placements. Alpine WSG is non-repellent and compatible with bait, so placing both in the same area works fine. Standard consumer pyrethroid sprays applied near bait placements will cause roaches to avoid those areas entirely, making the bait useless. Rotate the gel bait active ingredient between treatment cycles. If you use an indoxacarb gel for the first treatment, switch to an abamectin or amamectin benzoate product for the second. This is resistance management. It prevents selection for resistance to any single active ingredient by alternating the mechanism of toxicity. Treatment efficacy is directly tied to sanitation, and this is worth being specific about rather than just stating in general terms. German cockroaches can sustain themselves on traces of food that most people wouldn't consider significant: grease residue on a stove burner, a thin film on a shelf, crumbs under the toe kick of a cabinet. As long as competing food sources are present and accessible, the motivation to feed on your bait placements is reduced and treatment results slow down. Deep sanitation means cleaning behind and under appliances, not just countertops. It means cleaning the grease trap beneath stove burners and behind the drip pans. It means wiping down the inside walls and floor of cabinets, not just the shelves. And it means addressing moisture. A slow drip under the sink or condensation around a refrigerator line creates the humid microenvironment German cockroaches specifically require to thrive. Exclusion, sealing the entry and travel routes, limits reinfestation and population spread. Use silicone caulk to seal gaps along cabinet edges where they meet walls, around pipe penetrations under the sink, along baseboards where there are visible gaps, and around the perimeter of any electrical outlets in the kitchen. In apartments and multi-unit buildings, coordinating with building management for treatment of adjacent units and shared wall voids is often the deciding factor in whether a treatment holds long-term, because an untreated neighboring unit can resupply your unit continuously regardless of how thorough your own treatment is. To summarize the complete approach, start with a thorough shop vacuum removal of the accessible population and all reachable egg capsules. Follow immediately with a combined spray of Alpine WSG and Teco Pro applied to all harborage areas throughout the affected space. Supplement with gel bait in small, precise placements in cracks and crevices. Maintain deep sanitation and seal entry points. Monitor with glue boards throughout and repeat the spray application in 2 to 3 weeks. The reason this works when everything else hasn't is that it addresses the problem at 3 levels simultaneously: the visible population, the developmental pipeline that's rebuilding it, and the physical conditions that sustain it. Targeting any one of those levels in isolation is why single-product approaches produce temporary results. Address all 3 together, and German cockroaches become a problem you can actually solve. If you found this useful, subscribe for more practical, research-based pest control content. We'll see you in the next video.